Good morning, everyone. This is Sohaila Bana from 94803 Emergency Preparedness Alliance. This is our second meeting for Fire Safe Council. We have with us Mike Wilson from CAL FIRE, Chief Montoya from Richmond Fire District. I don't know if you should go through a round of introduction. I see Liz from PG&E. And Charla from EBMUD said they will participate as ex officio member in the Fire Safe Council, but they may not have representation today. And some members already told me, community members, they cannot come, hence we're recording so they can watch it later. Mike, all yours.
Okay, so well, this is really the first attempt at handing the meeting over to you as a standalone Fire Safe Council. You've done a lot of work. We've had a lot of communication offline, so I think there's a great deal happening behind the scenes for the folks who are here attending today, to let them know the great work that you're doing to kind of get this formed and to work through some of the challenges, obviously, of starting up a Fire Safe Council, which are minimal. The benefits truly outweigh those challenges, and those, we're very fortunate to have a unique opportunity to work through the city of Richmond as the fiscal agent and the support behind the starting the group, because a lot of times what would happen is a group would have to pursue their 501c3 to basically get started so that they could apply for and utilize funding of federal, state, and local grants. So in this case, since we have the city of Richmond as the fiscal agent and support, we should be able to work through their finance department to utilize that tax ID. And if we submit for any funding, the funds would be able to be put into a line item on that budget and then be distributed at some point to pay for project work that would be done. So depending on what the projects are, obviously, one of the key elements of starting up a Fire Safe Council is actually working with your existing CWPP, and probably in this case, maybe even expanding your CWPP to identify projects and needs within your own organization. And as you do that, identify those projects and needs and can kind of paint a picture of what those are for everyone. Then we start working on forming a basically an idea on how to which lane to go down to pursue the funds that you want to do. In this case, there's, as we know from previous meetings and meetings with our government partners, there's a lot of lands that are, oh, I'm sorry, let's see, what is CWPP for? That's CWPP is the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And that is actually a necessity for pursuing grant funds. Basically, it shows that you've identified where the funds are needed and how they're going to be used. And it's a kind of a constant flowing work that we utilize to basically identify critical needs, other project needs and threats and different things throughout your community. And in this case, because I think we have a lot of folks from a lot of different smaller, maybe community groups, and I'm going to make it up down over your way to Contra Costa County to take a look and try to get a clear idea on where all these areas are as we start transitioning out of our workshop season and county coordinator grant workshops to be able to come down and actually get eyes on what we're going to be working with. So as that happens, we're pre-fire season right now. Of course, fire season's year round, but we're in that area where we can still get out and do some early morning vegetation removal and some project work that will help reduce the wildfire risk in your area. So why don't we want to do maybe a questions and answer opportunity here? Sohaila?
If you could tell us that, I started with my own questions and then we move on. So in the agenda I had put, and sorry, I didn't consult with you because you said you were busy with the workshops. I just didn't want to be annoying. The suggested agenda includes coming up with mission, membership, name, so we can start working on 501c3. But I think perhaps you need to clarify for us. Are we ready for that step, or Is there anything else we need to do ahead of time? And what is the role of the city specifically in the process?
So from your side, you're really taking those first steps of gathering the community members that are going to be part of this, the willingness to commit as community members. Obviously, there's going to be somewhat of a time expectation of having folks participate in meetings, potentially participate in project work and or work on maybe grant writing and things like that. So identifying roles for those folks who are here so that everybody has a clear understanding of what they would be doing as they get into these meetings. So we have a leader established, and Sohaila has done a great job kind of coordinating and taking this from the community side, which is great. Our city, we have the chief here, and I don't know, Chief, if we should maybe consider getting somebody from the finance department on board to see if they have any questions on how we would utilize them as a fiscal agent. So that's one consideration. But again, stepping through and maybe getting some level of understanding and expertise and expectations from the group who are here. So starting with that, I would say maybe just reaching out and having that introduction from each of the folks, and having the community members talk about maybe their own strengths and things they have to offer the group. A lot of times you'll have people say, hey, I retired from the government where I was a professional grant writer, and so I would like to help the group write grants, and may have somebody that has a background in finances, and they may be the liaison between the city and the group, and actually processing any incoming and invoices and outgoing expenses that would come up for the group as they try to work through project work. The next thing is really kind of do an assessment on what the needs are for the group. Is there going to be somebody who's going to be maybe responsible for outreach, networking, and social media presentations or development? And that's a big part, because keeping your other community members informed on the work you're doing is always a great opportunity. And it's also a great collection of data that can be used later on when you start doing grants and are able to report, here's some of the things that we've accomplished as a group. So that's kind of where we are. We've kind of taken this in a unique model in reaching out to all our agency partners, and we have commitment from all of them. And we see them here, some of them in the meeting today. So those are the agency partners that are able to support you by basically being a voice for you to their own entities they work for. Oftentimes they can help pool resources, and oftentimes they would in a fire safe council that has a 501c3 would potentially be your board members that would help coordinate your actual policy development and direction setting for your organization. So that's kind of the basics of it. And I don't want to get too in the weeds today, because I really want this to be coming from you, and you take it the direction you want to go. So as we do that, it's kind of like, and this isn't meant to sound demeaning at all. I'm going to be the training wheels. And so as we start working towards the organization developing and doing the work that they want to do and identifying the projects they want to do, I'm gonna step away and just be here to support you if you need me, rather than to be engaged in trying to direct you. So fire safe councils are very unique. They have a lot of autonomy. They have the ability to basically make decisions on what works for them. And I'll use an example of Santa Cruz, where I think I've talked a little bit about this in the past. They've identified needs within their own community that are specific to infrastructure. So identifying signs and different things for their community to help fire equipment, fire suppression equipment respond and be able to more easily get into situations, identify roads that are that are capable of handling the size of equipment that we operate, identifying water sources, identifying addresses, which is really huge, and making sure your community is really a user-friendly environment for fire crews. So that's just one of the many things they can do. Then it gets into the potential of fuel breaks or shaded fuel breaks. Up in my neck of the woods, we do a lot of shaded fuel breaks where the conifers, we go up and we keep them cleared so that we have a canopy above us, but actually have some elimination of ground fuel, ladder fuels that would be able to get into the trees during a wildfire event. So that's like a lot of the projects we work on up north, up in the Pines. But again, it's going to be kind of specific to your area. So I'll hand it back over to you, and again, try to be more of a person that can answer the questions as you head down a road, or if I hear something come up that maybe I have a red flag concern about, I'll raise my hand and we can talk about that, try to work through it. So
Thank you
hope
very
that
much. So for your information, I talked to some of the members, not everyone has responded yet, but asking them about their strengths. We have 3 people who have had experience in writing grants. Some of them are present here, some of them are not. One person who's already on the board of Diablo Fire Safe Council has volunteered to be the secretary. I volunteered to be the president until it starts moving. We are missing a treasurer, co-president in terms of the officers, but the way I envision it personally is we will have members from the community that can form committees to define projects. So hopefully we have people from different neighborhoods that can identify the needs. And we will have ex officio members from the city, county, fire departments, as well as PG&E, BMOD, East Bay Regional Parks, and City of Pinole. Tell us if it's realistic or not, so we can get together, talk about the projects and everything. But it'd be nice that we can have a quorum when officials, ex officio members are too busy to participate, so we can move on, apply for grants. And that's it for now. What do you think?
That sounds perfect. And I do see a couple questions in the chat that have come up here that I think we can kind of talk through. So I'm starting from the bottom and working back. That's correct. You did hear that if the city of Richmond is capable and willing to be the fiscal agent, then there is not necessarily a need to become a 501c3. However, if the more independent you are as an organization and stand as a nonprofit, it does give you the flexibility. I'll say this very kindly because unfortunately government sometimes slows things down because of their own processes, where 501c3s don't have to necessarily utilize the same rules and processes that government does. So if the city was to be the fiscal agent, their expectations may be that the city council members be the board. And if that's the case, then your city council members are making decisions on policies that are going to be related to your group. And that takes away from having the local community really making those decisions. So that's where a 501c3 can have a little more community specific involvement, if that makes sense.
Sure. Chief Montoya, please.
Yes, thank you, Sohaila. And Mike, one of the things that we talked about before we met with the group was when we showed the map of the current concerns, the areas of concerns, and then we talked to the different stakeholders and parcel owners about the projects that are going on. So I think when we get to the point where we are going, or the need has been identified and the priority has been set, at that point it's important, I think, to bring those projects back so that we don't overlap these things, and maybe they're doing something that we plan to do, but they're going to go into that area, and now that project doesn't become as high a priority as the other ones. So I think that still needs to happen. But one of the things too, when you talk about the funding and the city being the fiscal agent, as I had stated early on in meetings, is that as a fire chief in the fire department, we're willing to, be with this group until a certain point. They do now have the ability to be under a 501c3 status, and then now all monies are going to go to the Fire Safe Council. Because you're right, one of the things that I do want to reiterate, and what Mike said to the group, is that the city of Richmond, I'll inquire on how that process is going to work over here on our end, and how from somebody from finance will be able to be the fiscal agent and walk us through that process with the assistance, obviously, of this group. But that's going to be something, and you guys all know city bureaucracy and even county, where that may not be the fastest process. I just want to make it known to the group and clear that at a certain point, this needs to move into that status of the 501c3 because that's important. And now you know you have all these monies, you're able to administer it. There won't be any delays other than the ones that you impose on yourselves. And I think it'll make it flow that much better. But initially, you know, this is something that because of the timeliness of this, I think to get it started, I think this is the umbrella that we're gonna function under right now. And then the last thing too, Mike, is that at what point does this group as a fire safe council become sanctioned under your umbrella? That it's recognized as an official fire safe council in the state of California. And so I think that's important to know. And I think it's important that this group work towards obtaining that status, because when we apply for grants, you know, I'm sure it's going to be listed there as to what it's needed for. And now it's going to be under this title. And I know one of the steps is for this group to you know, find a name for this group officially. So at what point is this now an official group and sanctioned by your organization?
Great set of questions, Chief, and I'll again work backwards on this one. So as of right now, we actually don't have an accreditation or certification process through the California Fire Safe Council. It's in discussions with our board of directors to actually establish that, and that may be a membership-based, you know, thing in the future. But fortunately, right now, it's not a membership-based thing. So any council that identifies themselves and has the legal ability to do that, and again, being tied through a 501c3 or a special district or a government agency, they are able to do that legally. Where anything I would say where it would be illegal would be if an organization claimed to be a 501c3 and didn't have the backing and paperwork to support that, applied for grants, and then didn't have the legal ability to accept those grants. That could be something that could be considered illegal or inappropriate. So we would never want to head down that road. So right now, that the fact that you, Chief, and the city of Richmond are willing to be that umbrella agency is such a benefit for this group, because what that says is we're willing to go ahead and take the steps to allow you the time to become a 501c3, as you mentioned, Chief, and so very correct on the way this needs to go, and for so many reasons. Now, I personally love the fact that the city of Richmond is the driving force, or the entity that came in originally and actually raised their hand and said, we want to establish a fire safe council in this area. Now, this fire safe council itself benefits people who live in multiple jurisdictions, some of those out of the city limits. And so at some point, the city needs to have a realistic, basically approach at dealing with this and say, hey, you know, it's time for us to hand this over to you, because it gets complicated when an entity like a city tries to do business outside of their own jurisdiction. And city council members who are responsible for that will become very uncomfortable if it starts saying, we're sending money from a project over to a county entity and the county's not involved. Well, that can obviously become something that looks challenging to folks who are doing audits and things like that. So working towards that long-term solution of becoming a 501c3 is probably the safest and best bet for this group. Then they can take that name and call it, you know, whatever name they choose to give it. And I'll throw something out. I know we're utilizing the zip code right now as a name for the group. We've called it Wildcat Canyon. We've called it a few different names. As that group establishes and has in mind, if they wish to expand on their overall area that they're going to be responsible for, they might want to call it the East Bay Fire Safe Council or something more general. But obviously there's a pride and an ownership here right now that's keeping it local to the communities who are here, like El Cerrito, Richmond, and Wildcat Canyon group. So having that pride of ownership is very important too, and creates an esprit de corps that's very important for keeping that motivation going and keeping your community involved. So you're heading down the right path. Things are looking very good, and I think we're again, the foundation's built because we have a government entity that's going to be the umbrella for the moment. But again, taking that role and saying, okay, thank you for doing this for us temporarily. We're going to work towards a long-term solution, become our own entity. And they'll still be partners. There'll still be extreme involvement from the city of Richmond, for example, because we have a fire chief that has such a passion to keep our community safe. It shows all these community members from the different jurisdictions that, hey, we have somebody here that actually from the fire service that knows that, hey, we're important, and we have to, somebody has to look out for our well-being in this wildfire environment that's becoming so critical in California. So we have the point here right now with Chief, and so appreciate that. And I hope the community members can so clearly understand how important it is. I wish throughout the rest of California, we had more Chief Montoyas, because unfortunately some areas where we have major wildfire risk, our own local fire departments aren't involved yet. And so we're ahead of the game with that one. And then as this establishes and gets turned over more to the organization itself, again, the president and the staff and the board members for that Fire Safe Council, we all become just that support network, the wraparound services to be here to help you. One of the real benefits, and here's, I'll explain to you one of the biggest benefits you have right now, having the city of Richmond being the umbrella entity, is having your legal documents like your bylaws that we're looking through, that we utilized an example of Yolo County's bylaws, taking those bylaws and actually presenting it to the city attorney's office or the folks, the council that's available to the city to review it, make sure that everything's up to the legal standards. So another great opportunity where other entities, and I'll use Solano County, for example, some of their local fire safe councils wrote up bylaws and then had to pay an attorney large amount of money to review them and give legal advice and make changes. And that was an expense that entity, unfortunately, probably if they would have worked with their county council or city councils in the area, would have been able to avoid that expense and utilize that money for something more important like projects. So again, I think we're off to such a wonderful start here. I have talked about this with various groups throughout the state. I've been down in Santa Barbara County. I've been over in Mammoth and Mono County, and had discussions with some government officials as well as local officials who I'm able to say, hey, right now we're in the city of Richmond, this group is developing, and they're coming together so rapidly and so strong that this could be one of the entities that we as a state organization are able to say, hey, look at what these folks did. They're going to be our model for the way we want to see the rest of California do this. So you're that far ahead of the game.
Thank you, Mike. Before we answer the questions, we have raised hands. One question in everybody's mind is, do we need to define a geographic area or no?
To a point, I would say utilizing your county boundaries, and what was specific to trying to keep your county boundaries, Contra Costa County as a general boundary. You can then work off the general CWPP that's developed for Contra Costa County and add to it, and not have to make a complete standalone CWPP for just your organization. When things get complicated, and I'll use Yolo County as another example, Yolo County is a well-establishing fire safe council run through their resource conservation district and local partner entities that are there to support the community that's coming together. So it's a government funded entity through the county. However, they work very closely with local fire safe councils in Solano County. Now, the challenges happen when they go to write a grant application and they write a scope of work and they say, we want to do this project. And this project starts right here in Yolo County. And then it goes over into Lake Berryessa and works into this area of Solano County. And as a funder, the people who write the grants, they review this and say, well, I can't give this to 2 counties. I can only give it to 1 county. So half of their project goes away. So having those boundaries identified in your CWPP is extremely valuable.
Thank you, Sue. I think we go to raise hands first and then answer the questions in the chat. Sue, please. You're muted.
Right. Good morning. Thank you. I had a question, well, several questions. Our group started in September of 2018. We've been very active. Our group already has different people working on different projects. So we've got that. We've been working closely with Oakland Fire Safe Council. I know you and Sue Piper until she recently retired. I had a question. So we've been talking actually before this came up with Sohila about forming one, maybe possibly with Kensington, since we have our own little problems in this part of the county. But I will contact you, Mike, separately later and talk about that. I had a question about insurance. I know that Oakland Fire Safe Council and many of the other fire safe councils, I did listen to one of the Central Regional monthly meetings a while ago, because Oakland Fire Safe is in the central region and we're in the northern region. I guess just the boundary seems to be Contra Costa Alameda border. And I know that most of the fire safe councils carry liability insurance. And can you give us some information about the necessity for liability for the board members? And I know that Oakland Fire Safe carries a second one, I think, for maybe their volunteers. So how common is that, and is it recommended?
It's very common with the government supported agencies, basically those organizations that are run under the county or under a resource conservation district that have a special district or a government tie. So in this case, you do have the city of Richmond, who again, as the umbrella entity, has a level of insurance that they already have in place to support any project they accept. So I would turn that over specifically to Chief Montoya to maybe answer that question specific to this. But in other entities in other areas of California, it's kind of whatever that entity feels they need to do. Is there a potential threat? Yes, absolutely. If you can imagine, one of the big topics of discussion recently I had with, again, some folks down in the Mammoth area in Mono County, were just the challenges of working on project work where they're now doing prescribed burning in areas that, you know, we cross over in this quilt pattern of different properties, some federal, some state, some local. And if they're burning and a fire escapes, is there going to be a liability that goes behind that prescribed burning, you know, for the damages that are caused? Well, if an entity like a prescribed burn association doesn't have that type of insurance, then it does leave some things out there that are potentially challenging, you know, on the legal side of things. So I would probably refer to and ask that question to Chief Montoya and maybe to the city attorney for Richmond to see if that is a necessity for your local organization. I hope that answered that clear enough.
Okay. I know that the Oakland Fire Safe is a freestanding thing. I think they're not really associated too much. They're not associated, it seems, with either Alameda County or the city of Oakland. I know that at their meetings, usually there is at least one Oakland Fire Department personnel there just to update them, but they seem to be freestanding, and yet they have their liability insurance. And that's what my question, if you know offhand from the fire safe councils that are more freestanding, so to speak, do most of them have liability insurance, or do you not know?
I don't have the numbers to where I could give you an accurate to say most of them. I will say some do and some don't, and what that percentage is, I don't know. And part of that original discussion about does the California Fire Safe Council at some point want to move into a accreditation process or certification process? And that may be one of those things in the future that if we were to certify a Fire Safe Council, that would be one of the boxes that was checked. You know, are you self-insured? So again, I can't answer specifics to the whole state, but yes, there's a variety of them that do and a variety of them that don't. And oftentimes that's driven by the board to make that decision. Do we want to have insurance to support and protect us? So as a guy who came from the public sector, who worked in government, worked in that area all along, so many times, you know, you are so thankful for having that the protection in the event that something goes wrong. You never want it to go wrong, but oftentimes things happen and people, you know, file lawsuits against different entities and organizations. So having that insurance in place is oftentimes the fact that keeps things from going to court, and unfortunately settles things out under a protection. So Does that make sense?
Yes, and then a follow-up question to that is, as a fire safe council is being formed, and one of the first things you might want to do is obtain insurance besides the members chipping in for it, because I understand it's somewhere around at least $1,000 a year, from what I've heard from several different fire safe councils. That where would a fire safe council, is there possible to get initial startup funds for stuff like
That is
that?
possible. And so we have capacity building grants that often come up, and those are the type of projects that you can identify that as we establish this, we need capacity in creating, legal support and or buying equipment to get started or whatever that happens to be. So yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. Pam?
I understand that this meeting is mostly about the formation of the council, not about the logistics of putting fires out or the challenges about that. But there's a crossover that I want to just use this example. If we look at a map of the, let's say, El Sobrante and Richmond and even Pinole area, it looks so gerrymandered, where literally it's not like a patchwork where you could say, okay, this block and this block. And literally, I mean, you could have a piece of property that's in like 3 jurisdictions. And so my question is, when we're forming these separate fire safe councils for specific areas, like the Kensington area was mentioned, there's maybe areas in El Sobrante and Richmond that have particular, like the city is different than the hillsides. How can we keep the fire safe councils organized and united so they're not kind of chopped up so much that we can't get things done effectively? A perfect example is there was a fire here that took the whole hill. We had 11 fire trucks and an airplane, and half the fire was in Richmond and half the fire was in El Sobrante. And part of the reason it became such a huge fire is because the reporting of it was so confusing, because the dispatcher couldn't tell where to send people or what jurisdiction they should send from. So I'm just asking, the fire safe councils that become formed, how can they not become the same problem of this kind of gerrymandered or patchwork separation? I hope that question is clear.
I could answer that, Mike, or I would like to. So Pam, what we want to do here, though, at this meeting is stay focused on forming this council. This is only the second meeting, and I'm mindful to what you're saying. But at that point, right now, or at that point, when the fire safe council, this fire safe council is established, along with what Sue Duncan perhaps forming another one and another one after that in this area. That's where that collaboration takes place, where just like we do now as fire departments, we work together with the surrounding fire departments on preparation for wildfire in this area, because we know there's so many jurisdictions, overlapping districts and boundaries and so on and so forth. So that right now is a separate matter. To what you're referring to is a separate matter other than the fire safe council. Once those councils are established like this one, that's where what I had mentioned and brought up earlier to Mike, that the projects have to be coordinated, because all the stakeholders that have been involved in our meetings thus far are willing to do that. But at a certain point, when those projects are prioritized, that we have to collaborate with all these stakeholders so that we're not doing the same project. And so there's steps here. And I think what you're referring to is still a step down the line. So like I said, I'd like to stay focused on what we need to cover today, especially having Mike here, because he's spread thin, and I think we should focus on right now just what we need to do to get this going from this point forward. And at some point, I think what you bring up really good points, but at this point, I don't think that needs to be covered so much at this meeting. And it will eventually come, and things we'll have to think about, just like what Sue was saying with the insurance. This is something that, every city and county, and I know that county I used to work for, they were self-insured. And, we didn't have to buy insurance because the LA County is just so big. They were all of the prescribed burners that we did were covered under that umbrella. And so we didn't have to buy insurance. It was just covered by the county. So each city, each county is different. And that at that point, when I take this to the city of requesting to be the fiscal agent for this group, they'll tell me what if I'm going to need insurance with this, because that's they know the bylaws and they know the guidelines of the city of Richmond. So they'll let me know that. So all these things I think are taken in steps. So, but I think
I guess what I hear what you're saying about staying on topic. I guess what I'm really asking is, since we're at the step of forming the fire council, is it a better thing to have one large fire council with these separate jurisdictions within that, and they can make the case for the grants that they need, rather than having all these separate little fire councils? That's what I was trying to ask.
that's something that we can't control whether they, I think, sure, it would be better if I think off the top of my head to form just one fire safe council for this area.
Right.
But at the same time, at this point in time, I don't want it to hold up the formation of a fire safe council to get going on what we need to do. And I think at some point, whether they want to join this council to cover a bigger area, I think that would probably at this point in time be the best scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go to the questions in the chat. I believe the question about do we need to form a 501c3 is answered. What is the map covered by the council? It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, that we don't need to identify any map in our bylaws, just the name identifies where we are. Is that correct?
That's correct. A general description, I think, is sufficient at this point.
Okay. And then what are the competencies people needed to form the 501c3? And we had another similar questions that what's expected from the members of the council?
So participating, as you mentioned, as the president, you're the leader and you're taking the lead in getting the information out, coordinating meetings and these types of things. A secretary may step up and end up doing that to support you, and then also assist in the legal and fiscal support. And then a fiscal agent or a treasurer would be another person to support the fiscal side of that. Then you have your general board of directors who are there to make decisions and help basically steer the policy and decision making for the organization. And then again, some organizations, depending on how big their fire safe councils are, have staffers that are actually part of their fire safe council that go out and do different things, potentially a grant writer, potentially there's so many. We have project managers that actually coordinate projects, and some of these organizations, and again, specific ones that are that quasi government / 501c3 that are like resource conservation districts. Oftentimes when they develop a fire safe council, and many of them have now 24 in the state, apply for funds to get a county coordinator, and their county coordinator actually facilitates the needs for the entire county and all the fire safe councils within. Kind of going back to Pam's question a little bit and understanding where you're going with that. So I love using other counties as examples of what works well and what doesn't work. Siskiyou County, who has a county with 24 separate fire safe councils in them, were initially competing. They wrote, I don't know how many, because I actually got contacted by the CAL FIRE unit chief that said, can you please stop fire safe councils from forming in Siskiyou County? And I said, why, chief? He said, because each one of them wants to submit their own individual CWPP, and I have to be the signing agent for these as the county fire warden, and I have to review all these, and I've got other things to do running a CAL FIRE unit. And I said, I completely understand, chief. So when we took our county coordinator grant funding and we looked at counties like Siskiyou, we thought this is a great opportunity to have a single point of contact for the county who's going to work on establishing a countywide CWPP and try to collect all those fire safe councils as communities within the county, but hopefully with the intent of getting everybody on the same page so that they're not competing against each other. And what had historically happened in Siskiyou County is when grants would become available, 24 different grant applications would come in from Siskiyou County saying, we want to get money, we want to spend this money here. Well, when you throw too many things, the shotgun effect at that type of a project money other counties throughout the state that had single projects identified within their whole county as a CWPP were awarded the funds, and that county wasn't, because rather than competing with each other, we found that counties that work with all the other partners inside and collaborate were truly the models of success for getting project work done. So they become the entities that obtain those grants more often. So I'd love to steer this organization towards that thought process as you're developing. So meaning that if there's 10 different communities in Contra Costa County that all want to be part of this, as you start working towards that, it may be easier for future grant funding. But again, that may be challenging for the city if the city's still in it. We're in the early stages and the city's trying to say, hey, we're willing to be your umbrella, but now we're reaching way out to these different entities. We need to back off, because the city council has a responsibility under their own statutes and documents that basically establish how that city was developed, that says what they can and can't do, the services they can provide, that they can't provide, etc. So I hope that makes sense.
It was my understanding that Chief Montoya suggested we don't use the city as an umbrella, but go directly for 501c3. And I just wanted to add something that at the time I was asking, actually begging Oakland Fire Safe Council to have a Zoom training for us for an hour, emergency preparedness. They said, no, that's outside our scope. We're defined to be in Oakland only. And I thought that was ridiculous. So, and they just told me that in revising their 7-year plan, because of all the funds available, they're going to revise their goals and missions so they leave their hands more open in terms of what they can do. That's something we need to consider. So let's go to other questions and then come back to this topic of whether we should be West Contra Costa County Fire Safe Council or Contra Costa or whatever. So I think this question was answered. How does this include unincorporated Contra Costa County? Example, El Sobrante. Why would Richmond vote to fund anything outside Richmond? I think if we answered this, that we're going to have 501c3 and cover the area. Another question, is there a danger or benefit to identifying as a council that covers many jurisdictions? East Bay is huge, for instance.
Yeah, so geographically, you have other counties that have done just that and identified different jurisdictions within their counties to again work together, like I'd mentioned previously, in becoming an all-incorporated group of people who work together. They have their own identities. They are part of an overall fire safe council for whatever jurisdiction it's happened to name. But there's even small groups with 10 homeowners in a small group that live in a small community up in Sonoma County that have their own name as I don't remember the name, but this neighborhood fire safe council. But as an overall, they're part of Fire Safe Sonoma. So when grant applications get put in, they're identified under that county CWPP, and they're able to reach out and get a big part of a bigger pot of money that the county then utilizes for identifying which of these neighborhood fire safe councils needs the money to work. It's again, how you develop and how you make it work is kind of up to you. There's so many different models out there, but I think in this case, as a large geographic area with a lot of different community and neighborhoods involved, as you grow, it's a good idea to have, if you can get everybody collaborating, again, it increases your chances significantly of getting future funding, especially with all the different funds that are available right now. I mean, I actually, in talking to the California Coastal Commission, they're hungry for this group to establish so that they can actually say, hey, we have Bay Area County specific money that we need to give away. We want to give it to you. And isn't it wonderful when organizations want to give you money? I always think that's a plus.
Chief, please.
Yeah, and I think Mike has alluded to this, and I know you touched on it, Sohaila, and I think it's important for us to remember as a group right now, being under the umbrella of Richmond. When I take this information to our city attorney and finance department, it'll be a lot easier to move forward with it and the approvals if it's specific to Richmond. And I think initially that will help us get all this approved and move forward with this. Later on, when we do establish this group as a nonprofit, then at that point, I think we could incorporate the other people that want to be part of this group. But I think initially it would work best, in my opinion, that we stay as much specific to Richmond as possible to get it approved by the city attorney, because I don't want to raise any red flags, and rightfully so, because they're going to have to do their due diligence and say, well, why are we now covering liability for another city or entity? Now, I think they're mindful, and I could articulate this to them, where there's a lot of different stakeholders here and parcel owners, but I think they understand that and willing to go with that. But in terms of other city councils trying to join at this time, I think that would slow the process and perhaps even the approval.
Okay, I'm confused. So what you're suggesting is while we're forming 501c3, because we want to get our hands on the money as soon as possible, the city's gonna take this step. You're gonna take it, the city, and I'm confused actually what it is. If you could explain, please.
So what I'm saying, Soheila, is right now forming this council, because the city is, needs to provide us the approval that they're going to be the fiscal agents for any grants that are granted to this fire safe council. They're more apt to approve that if they know that these grant that they're going to receive as a city, and I'll obviously help write. And hopefully there's some people in the group that could assist with that. That they're more apt to approve something like that because they know it's specific to Richmond. Whereas if we were doing it for El Cerrito or another city or even the county, now, I think it raises a concern for them that they're covering the grant and the liability, and they're doing work for another jurisdiction, which, just like Mike had alluded to, there's certain bylaws that say what they can and cannot do. But if it's specific to Richmond, in these grants that it's going to serve in the city of Richmond, initially, I think that's the best way to go. And I think it's more apt for us to get the approvals from the city to be that fiscal agent that, as a fire department, and as a city, we're willing to do. So moving forward, I just want everybody to keep that in mind. Now, when we get to the point where this council does establish itself as a nonprofit, then at that point, the city now goes, well, now they're the fiscal agent, they're their own, and really, they just back away from it.
Okay, if I understand correctly, actually, applying to become 501c3 takes only a few weeks. I mean, in a couple of weeks, we can have our articles of incorporation submitted the Secretary of State, get the EIN number, and we're there. So how long does it take for the city to do this?
Probably around the same time.
Okay, so do you think if you should do both at the same time? Or just go straight to be a 501c3?
I don't know specifically how long the application process is for a nonprofit. Maybe Mike was more familiar with that. And yeah, maybe it is a good idea to apply for both, but I couldn't answer that.
I will say that during times of COVID, just the normal process of filing things through, your state agencies has definitely slowed things down, and not to an overwhelming amount. But I think just to help clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, I think what the chief is saying, and this is a gift. Richmond is willing to kind of be hey, we're here for you until you get established. So having that initial government entity that could be that support network, if you said, hey, we want to get a grant to help us incorporate as a group and become a 501c3, and that grant funding now would be passed through the city to you to help develop that funding mechanism that you would actually then get your everything together to establish that 501c3. And depending on how robust this group is and how many folks want to participate in making sure that gets done, the larger the group, the easier the lift. So again, having people to support getting things done, I think is a great opportunity for this group specifically, where other entities come in with sometimes two people that say, we want to write a CWPP, we want to establish as a 501c3, and we want to be a fire safe council. And my thoughts are, bless you for doing that, but at the same time, you're going to be doing a lot of work as two people. I see here you have, a nice large group of 17 people in this call. A large number of them are going to be that part of that lift, so that's going to be very helpful. And I do have to mention, I got to jump off in 5 minutes for a county coordinator grant, but I am available by email to everybody. And again, with the exception of next Tuesday and Wednesday for the Paradise Workshop, most days I'm available if we need to schedule another meeting for continued follow-up.
Wonderful. We'll organize another meeting for next Thursday. I'd like to ask everyone, because we don't have time to go through all the questions. If you email them, please, I'll put them all together, send to Mike. Mike can answer by email. But Chief, can you tell us what's needed from us to move forward with that step you're suggesting, please?
Are you talking to Mike or?
You.
Okay. Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, before Mike has to leave, I wanted to ask Mike, what are the next steps that you see for this group for the next meeting?
So I think if you clearly have an established leadership, which we do, we now have a president, we have a secretary, identifying those other key parts of this will be helpful. Maybe some outreach from your side, Chief, just to your city attorney and your city finance director to verify that they're okay with us doing this as a temporary solution to get that time for the group to get the 501c3 paperwork complete. I think that's probably the next steps. Again, using your community engagement and reaching out to as many community members as you can. You're doing an amazing job. It's so nice to see this many interested community members coming into a room together to start talking about formation. I mean, I think let's set a goal for ourselves. Let's try to get 100 community members involved in this as we move forward for the next 6 months. So using that as an outreach opportunity, and again, just getting out there and getting information distributed. It can be as simple as this group, whatever name they're going to utilize, is currently working to establish a fire safe council in this area of Contra Costa County, and we want you to be involved. And getting that information out, continued communication with our partner agencies is huge. I actually had a phone conversation with the chief of East Bay Regional Parks, who called me and was concerned that during one of our last meetings that I had mentioned that it was unfortunate they weren't at the meeting, and the chief was concerned that I thought that they weren't participating. I said, absolutely not, Chief. I just thought it was unfortunate that we were talking about some areas and properties that I really wanted these folks to be on the call. And they said, well, we'll be on the call, but you understand we have a lot of other things going. I absolutely understand. And so I respect them for number one, reaching out and to say, hey, are we giving enough? As well as our other partner agencies like PG&E, East Bay MUD, the different entities who are here to support us, keeping us engaged and in asking questions that need to be asked so that we can all be on the same page of communication. Because just like that easy lift of having more people doing the work, the lift gets easier. Having everybody with kind of a consistent message as we move forward, I think is extremely important as well. So.
And just one last, thank you for that, Mike. And just one last deal. I know the outreach now to the city attorney, and I'll cover that with the group when you Zoom off, is I know that there's templates in the Fire Safe Council handbook of agenda and letters sent out to the community and so forth. Is there a template that's available or language that announces Fire Safe Council to a city to become the fiscal agent for the city? Is there anything like that you have a template of that we can use here?
I'm not sure, but what I'll do is reach out to some of my grants folks and see if they have done that in the past and see if we can maybe borrow somebody else's that's already done it for sure.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate
Thank you. And it was great seeing everybody today. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It's so great to see this many interested and active people in your community.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch and share more questions with you by email. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So Chief, you were going to tell us more?
Yeah, so I think the next step here, just what Mike, and that's what I was thinking of, is Mike had mentioned the outreach to the city attorney. So I think for the next step here for us on the city side is, and the fire department, is to get that, perhaps that Mike already has a template like that, not to reinvent the wheel, and a language and a template that's been used before and was successful. And so what I'll do is work with Mike once I get that, and maybe he may not have it, is to develop that and craft that so that I can forward that to the city attorney and to the city manager, my boss, and get that process started. And at that point, I think get a better idea how long this is going to take to process it on the city side, and move forward with that process. Once I know that, I think as a group, we could still continue to the process of having perhaps a meeting another 2 weeks to, name the Fire Safety Council, what this group's name is going to be. You guys, work it out, or how that name is going to come up, because it is important to identify this group, not only as a Fire Safety Council, but as a name, and it'll give it that identification on what we're speaking with and what I could take forward to the city. So, and it is part of and again, I want to keep on reminding everybody to refer to the Fire Safe Council handbook that I forwarded to Soheila, and I know she forwarded to the group, hopefully. I think she did, and that everybody has, because in that handbook, it's pretty clear on what the steps are needed to form a council. So I think Mike is very helpful for us to provide that insight on things that aren't answered in that handbook. But for the most part, the handbook does cover the process. And so I think the next step here, just like Mike had alluded to, is once I get that more information from the city, I'll bring it to this group. But in the meantime, I think we can move forward with the steps that are listed in the handbook.
Okay, so we are to actually form a Richmond Fire Safe Council under the city, and then parallel to it, a wider one like Contra Costa County or West Contra Costa County.
Yeah.
And the only thing I would like to mention is I've done nonprofits before. So forming a nonprofit is a lot of work, and then dismantling it is a lot of work. So I wonder if we'll end up, ending that Richmond Fire Safe Council, or it's going to continue its life next to the bigger one.
I think, at one point, I think what and that's is where you need to clarify with me when you mean parallel. So I think what you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, Soheila, parallel would be where we're trying to get under the approvals for the fiscal agent of the city of Richmond and that umbrella. And I think simultaneously in parallel, I think is what you're referring to, is now apply for the nonprofit. And at that point, when that's approved, then the city of Richmond now umbrella would no longer exist.
Oh, so it's the single. Okay, now I understand. It's a very good suggestion. Okay, thank you very much. So it's the same entity. We start under the city of Richmond, and then we move into our own autonomous entity.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that's the plan, because like I had said really early on in this whole process, and I had that conversation with you initially, is that as a fire chief in the fire department, I'm willing to take that responsibility on, because
Thank you so much.
Because there is a need here. And just like when I did that tour over there with Chief Bontempo, there is a need here that again, I want to get started as soon as possible. Even grants I saw, and I was going to bring it up to the group. We received an email yesterday on the IAFC roadside community chipping program. And that's something, a grant that hopefully we can, the thing about grants, when we get this notice, they're due the next week. So hopefully we can apply for this, but you can get up to $20,000 for a chipping program that you can use for that. So we'll apply for that and hopefully get it in before the deadline. But these are things that I don't want to miss out on. And that's why initially, I thought it was best, and Mike agrees with that, where, we're under the city umbrella. The fire department, I'm here and committed to get this going. But at some point, the fire safety councils work a lot better, as Mike had explained, that you're your own entity. Because you don't have to wait for the bureaucracy of a city to apply for this, to get that money, to distribute it. It all goes to you.
Got it. Thank you so much. That clarifies. So we'll start the work a nonprofit initially under Richmond. Just let us know what's needed. We have a few more minutes. Steve, make it quick, please.
Sorry about that. Yes, I wanted to say a couple of things. One is I do have experience writing 501c3 apps. It usually takes several months at least to get it approved. The IRS has to process it and so on and so forth. What if we start out as the Greater Richmond Fire Safe Council? We would, and just continue our work to see if we want to put together a larger West County type group.
Yeah, again, Steve, that's something that I like that name, Greater Richmond, because, you know, it gives it that, label where, you know, you're going to absorb perhaps other areas. So I think that's a good name. But again, I'll leave that up to the group on what name they decide to use.
Yeah, we should have a name that, you know, matches. So maybe we can continue the discussion by email and to be more prepared for the next meeting. One question I wanted to ask Mike, and I felt, is that some people cannot come to the meeting at this time. If you could have a different time, but let's continue for the next two meetings, same time, 10 a.m. Thursday and then next Thursday. And after that, with hopefully we have moved forward enough to have another time for the meeting. So I'll be in touch with you by email, Chief, and with Mike and with you, everyone. If someone could volunteer, please, to save the chat. If you click on those things and just send the questions to me so we can get answers from Mike, that'd be awesome. Marilyn, could you do that, please? Okay. I don't know. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Chief. I'll be in touch and I'll do my best to get some of the questions to Mike. If I don't get them, please, everyone, send me emails. I appreciate that.
Thank you. It's nice
Thank-
talking to everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Uh-huh.
Bye.